All right, guys, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Welcome to another live. Welcome to another live. This is acabdevil, ACAB, 1312 all day in the house. Welcome to another Enemy of the State live, and this is also slash the Pitchfork podcast. So today's topic is going to be cops are not your friends. Police are not your friends. Make sure when you come in, you guys are tapping the screen, send me some likes. Make sure you make some comments. Make sure you share the live stream. Let everybody know that I'm running this because I want to have a conversation about why cops are not your friends. Cops are not your friends because they do nothing but cost the American taxpayer money, and they do nothing but further the racial divide, gender divide, and also the sexuality divide in this country. By that I mean this. They are used as the enforcement arm of people who are bigots. They are used as the enforcement arm of people who want to target people because they are different. Prime example, say you get someone who moves into a neighborhood, regardless of race or gender or whatever they identify as. What's one of the first things that they will do? They will get the police called on them by a Karen. And that shows you right there how the police are actually used. They are used as the enforcement arm of Karens and also people who are anti-American, who are anti-freedom, who are against the very idea of you having the freedom to walk down the street or sleep in your own home, or own your home without paying property taxes, or owning the firearms that you want, or speaking freely. That's how the police are used. Notice that throughout history, police have been used to quell down rebellions. Police have been used to quell political dissent. Police have been used to stop free speech. Police have been used to disarm people. Police have been used, law enforcement in any country, in any era, have been used to disarm the peasants against the powerful. That's how law enforcement is used in this country, and everyone knows it. Everyone knows it. And see, even the Karen who's going to call the police on you randomly when you're walking down the street, black person, I want you to understand something. She only does that because she understands the actual purpose of the police. When it comes to, the person who has a different sexuality, who's trying to go to a nightclub, trying to enjoy themselves, and then have somebody call the police on them for immoral reasons. That person understands what the police are used for. Look at what's happening in Iran right now. Look at what's happening with the moral police right now. People understand what law enforcement is meant for. Law enforcement enforces laws even when they are unjust. And that is the thing that people need to understand. Law enforcement enforces laws even when they are unjust. That's why someone can be sent to prison for smoking a plant. That's why someone can be sent to prison for eating a mushroom. That's why someone can be sent to prison because they didn't pay taxes. So the thing about it is, police are not your friends. Law enforcement in general are not your friends, because every tyrannical law you could think of, every law that you don't agree with, guess who's going to enforce it? All the people out there talking about their Second Amendment, right? And I strongly support Second Amendment. I strongly support the right to bear arms. I strongly support that. Strongly. Right? Strongly. But who's going to disarm people when it comes time for the great disarming? Police. Who has disarmed more people? I'm not a fan of Joe Biden. There's nothing there's nothing positive I've ever said about Joe Biden on my entire channel. But I gotta be honest, who's disarmed more people, Joe Biden or cops in California? Well, by hard number, it's actually cops in California. Just gotta be honest with you. But all the people on the political right, they don't want to be honest about that because these people are secretly, they're for big government. They're for big government. Because if you're not for big government, let me show you something real quick. Let me flip my screen. If you support police officers and you say that you are against big government, well, you got a problem here because you got a problem with numbers. So I look up all the police misconduct settlements, right? And here's the problem that you're going to have if you support police officers, right? Let me go ahead and show you something real quick. Let's look at all the police misconduct settlements. First of all, let's look up what police actually do, how they actually spend their time, right? How do police actually spend their time? This is from the New York Times. I want you to see this. How do police actually spend their time? What do they actually do? Do they actually go out and save people? Are they actually the superheroes, right? Right? That they claim that they are. Are they actually the superheroes, right? Actually. Let's find out. Let's find out. Typical shift by officer. Let me just bring that in a little bit closer, right? Violent crime calls are only at 4% on average. And these results are not just isolated, right? It's also from Vox. We train police to be warriors and then send them out to be social workers because that's how they're pretty much trained. And closes out. And this out too. But I want you to see this, right? You see, they don't actually do anything, right? They don't do anything. Police misconduct costs cities millions every year, but that's where the accountability ends. Look at this, right? Look at the city of Cleveland in Ohio. All the settlements, all the money that taxpayers pay out. Not the actual officers, not the police unions, but taxpayers. Why should I have to pay? Why should anyone have to pay for someone else's bad behavior? The same people whining and complaining about welfare. Well, why do I gotta pay because somebody else made a mistake? Well, why do I gotta pay because they made a mistake then? Huh? Explain that to me. You can't talk around it because the moment that you talk around that point and you don't directly address that point, I don't respect you. Sorry. Just not happening. Not happening. Police misconduct cost taxpayers over $3.2 billion in settlements, reported in March 9th of this year. $3.2 billion. $3.2 billion. Why should I have to pay for that? Why? In Chicago, for example, officers who were subject to more than one claim accounted for more than $380 million of the nearly $528 million in payments in that city. The typical payout for cases involving officers with multiple claims ranging from illegal search and seizure to use of excessive force was $10,000 higher than those involving officers. So basically, the bad officers who they refuse to get off the force, they cost more in police misconduct settlements because guess what? They're bad officers. So when you keep bad officers around, guess what? They're gonna cost you money. That's just life. That's basically how this whole thing is gonna peel out every single time. Few cities or counties track claims by names of the officers involved, meaning that officials may be unaware of officers whose alleged misconduct is repeatedly costing taxpayers. While multi-million-dollar settlements regarding allegations of police misconduct often generate headlines, the median amount of the payments is $17,500, and most cases are resolved with little to no publicity. New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles accounted for the bulk of the overall payments, documented at more than $2.5 billion. $2.5 billion. You can't justify that, man. You can't tell me how great police officers are when they're costing us billions. That's on them. There's no excuse. There's no defense for that. There's no defense for that. If you try to, you will look silly. There's no defense for that. Here's another one here from 538, right? Cities spend millions on police misconduct every year. Here's why it's so difficult to hold departments accountable. I want you to see some of these numbers. Some of these numbers are just wow. Wow. Here, they have a whole list here, right? Police misconduct settlements can be costly. Total police settlement spending in records attained by 538 and the Marshall Project, along with years of data available and the average amount spent annually on police settlements. I want you to see these numbers. Look at Los Angeles. Yo, Chicago. They even listed the amount of years they studied. New York, 10 years. Chicago, 10 years. LA, 10 years. DC, 9 years. Philadelphia, 11 years. Detroit, 9. Milwaukee, 10. Baltimore, 5. San Francisco, 10. Cleveland, 11. These are not just flukes. They took multiple years and found that these people, these police officers, these race soldiers are costing us billions, bro. Look at these totals. That's absurd. That's crazy. And then what makes it worse is that not only, as I've already shown you, police don't actually spend their time on violent crime. It's only about 4% of the time. Not only are they costing you billions of dollars in police misconduct settlements, but there's a problem with white supremacists and law enforcement. And law enforcement knew this years ago. This comes from the National Security Archive. FBI warned of white supremacists and law enforcement 15 years ago. FBI Counterterrorism Division assessment, white supremacist infiltration of law enforcement. October 17th, 2006. 2006. I'm just going to read you the actual excerpt here, okay? I want you to see what you're paying for as taxpayers, right? Description: this 2006 FBI report details the threats posed by white supremacists infiltrating all levels of law enforcement and notes that one of the major worries that such infiltration is compromised intelligence. The report also states white supremacist presence among law enforcement personnel is a concern due to the access they may possess to restricted areas vulnerable to sabotage and to elected officials or protected persons whom they could see as potential targets for violence. In addition, white supremacist infiltration of law enforcement can result in other abuses of authority and passive tolerance of racism within communities served. End quote. The House Oversight Committee released an unredacted version of the document posted here. So this is an actual FBI document about the white supremacist infiltration of law enforcement, released in 2006. And people pretend like I'm just making it up. Guys, this has been out there for some time. I want you to see some of this stuff. It is mind-boggling how detailed some of the reports have been and how little action have been taken. So, key judgments, right? Although white supremacist groups have historically engaged in strategic efforts to infiltrate and recruit from law enforcement communities, current reporting on attempts reflects self-initiated efforts by individuals, particularly among those already within law enforcement ranks, to volunteer their professional resources to white supremacist causes which they sympathize. So, for the most part, these people are already within law enforcement. They are recruiting new people. Yeah. They are recruiting new people, but for the big chunk of it, they're already there. The primary threat from infiltration or recruitment arises from the areas of intelligence collection and exploitation, which can lead to investigative breaches and can jeopardize the safety of law enforcement sources and personnel. White supremacist presence among law enforcement personnel is a concern due to the access they may possess to restricted areas vulnerable to sabotage and to elected officials or protected persons whom they could see as potential targets for violence. In addition, white supremacist infiltration of law enforcement can result in other abuses of authority and passive tolerance of racism within communities served. The intelligence acquired through the successful infiltration of law enforcement by one white supremacist group can benefit other groups due to multiple allegiances white supremacists typically hold. So one group getting access to any of this stuff means that they all do. They all do. Right? They all do. Guys, look at this. There are whole FBI reports on this. Right? Here's one example here, right? A white supremacist leader is known to have acquired a sensitive FBI intelligence bulletin on the white supremacist movement that had been posted on law enforcement online and had inadvertently become publicly accessible through a law enforcement website. In addition to identifying the FBI personnel who prepared the bulletin, the document identified the FBI's FBI targeting interests within the white supremacist movement. So someone who worked in law enforcement leaked that to the white supremacists. You are paying these people. You are paying these people. You pay their salaries, you pay their pensions, you pay for their health care benefits, you pay for their bullets, you pay for the firearms, you pay for the body armor, you pay for the gasoline that goes in the patrol vehicle. You are paying these people, and yet for some reason since 2006, at minimum since 2006, there's been no questions asked or no answers given about all these white supremacists in law enforcement, all these race soldiers. Why is that?
Why is that? Why is that? Why? I have to ask that question. I have to ask that question. And while we're at it, right? You remember that whole attack on the power station in North Carolina? Remember that? You remember that? Let me ask you a question. What if I told you that the Oath Keepers are known to infiltrate law enforcement, and that the state of North Carolina embraced the Oath Keepers? Oath Keepers guard upstate military recruitment centers. Mission Protect, the protectors created in response to Chattanooga pop-pops, let's just say. In Greenville, the same place in which the power station was attacked recently. This actual accredited publication gave a glowing review, good press for the Oath Keepers. And the way that you know this, right? They actually, in the modern day, you wouldn't. This was written back in 2015, right? In the modern day, you would never give the link to an Oath Keeper website, but they actually did. Members of the Oath Keepers are not paid. They say they've been blown away by the positive community response. The positive community response out of South Carolina. And now you're wondering why your power stations are being attacked by white supremacist groups. Wow. See, when I say I was doing my investigation into this kind of stuff like this is what I look into. Because North Carolina is 8th in the nation. 8th in the nation for the most Oath Keepers. So if you're looking for the white supremacist group, right, who's probably doing this, there's your answer. I mean, you are 8th in the nation. And that was reported this year. Oh, no connection though, right? No connection. Hey, Pierce County also has some attacks on their power stations, right? I want you to take a look at something real quick. Ed Troyer. So if you're looking for a white supremacist in law enforcement who would help somebody pull off a power station attack, it would probably be somebody like Ed Troyer, right? Who lied on a black newspaper carrier and got off on a technicality. No connection though, right? No connection though, right? It just so happens to be North Carolina, where you're 8th in the nation in Oath Keepers. South Carolina, one of the most racist states in the whole nation. I spent 30 years in that state. That's my home state. I know the state of South Carolina, baby. 13 sheriffs convicted of crimes since 2010. That's an average of more than a sheriff a year. And that's just the sheriffs. We're not even talking about police chiefs. Yeah, think I'm lying? Let me go look it up real quick. Give me a second. Let me show you real quick that I don't cap when I say stuff. That when I say stuff, I always bring receipts, baby. That's the one thing about acabdevil. Let me show you something real quick. So when I just made a statement, right? That I come from a state, 13 sheriffs since 2010. Let's see. I want you to see that I didn't just make that up. Now, all the people in the chat who think that I just made that up, I want you to see that, right? I want you to think to yourself, all the people that were going to doubt me, and then I want you to read this headline. What I just said was true. South Carolina sheriff is 13th convicted since 2010. You have Oath Keepers, you have bad cops in law enforcement, all in that state too. I was trying to blow the whistle. I'm a law enforcement whistleblower from that state. I tried to blow the whistle. Nobody wanted to hear me. And now you have attacks on your power stations left and right. Now you got attacks on your power stations all over the place, and you're wondering how. Here, let me show you how. This article here is 2 years old. White supremacists and militias have infiltrated police across the U.S., report says. A former FBI agent has documented links between serving officers and racist militant activities in more than a dozen states. Wow. Wow. Interesting. In a timely new analysis, Michael German, a former FBI agent who has written extensively on the ways that U.S. law enforcement has failed to respond to far-right domestic terror threats, concludes that the U.S. law enforcement officials have been tied to racist militant activities in more than a dozen states since 2000, and hundreds of police officers have been caught posting racist and bigoted social media content. The report notes that over the years, police links to militias and white supremacist groups have been uncovered in states including Alabama, California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Louisiana, Michigan, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, Virginia, Washington, as in Washington State, and West Virginia. Mm, 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 mm. So let me get this straight. Let me get this straight. We have a situation, y'all, whereas we got power stations being attacked, and many have suspected that law enforcement is involved because let me get this straight. Right? Right? Let me get this straight. This happens in multiple states, and yet no one's seen anything. All the Karens, listen, if you live in Washington State, right, you know we have a bunch of Karens here. You mean tell me no Karens saw anybody enter or leave those power stations? In South Carolina? In North Carolina? Have you, go talk to any military wife who's ever been to North Carolina and ask them about the Karens. They are legendary. They are worse. They are darn near worse than New York. Right? Darn near worse. Darn near worse. You mean tell me no one saw anything? How can you explain that? How can you explain that? Unless cops are involved. How can you explain that? You, hold on. What neighborhood in South Carolina, North Carolina, and in Washington State are you going to attack a power grid? Which, by the way, I don't care how you slice or dice it. That's going to make noise. It's going to make noise. At any time of day or night. And no one sees you in any state. No one even pulls out their smartphone. You don't need an internet connection to have your camera function because that's saved to internal memory. No one's got any kind of footage with the cell phone recording culture that we have. Really? Right? Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on. Look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, do you truly believe that? You don't. You don't. And law enforcement in particular, they have a reason to do that. They have several motives. One is to push this idea that police are needed so that you can push funding for the police. You can also push fear tactics. And at the same time, you can push the blame off on other groups that you don't particularly like, thus justifying you going after them. And it also would explain why no one's seen anything in all 3 states. Well, now 5 states. But no one's seen a thing. And all 5 states so far are known to have oath keepers in law enforcement. Not just a little bit of oath keepers. They are in the top 10. That's significant. That's not something that I'm just going to ignore. So, with that being said, cops are not your friends. Because most of them are race soldiers or they're white supremacists. And that's been my tag talk. Until next time, horns up, peace out. Good night and good luck.